In this module, I'll talk about another research based on critical discourse analysis in Pakistani context. This study is about a critical discourse analysis of the editorials of Dawn and another international newspaper, New York Times, about the projection of a certain news event. This news event is based on an attack on a school in Pakistan, which became a news throughout the world. And in this incident, many school-going children were killed, and that was a horrific picture we could see on TVs that day. So there was an attack by some militants, or allegedly by Talibans in that attack. And as I said earlier, it killed many people. And the projection of this news, according to Tariq and his colleagues, can be an interesting site for analysis, because this could tell us how various actors, agents involved in this incident are projected by the newspapers being run in various socio-cultural settings. And this was a terrible incident which caused some kind of emotional reaction to all people across the world who listened to about it. And those who lived that time would have still a kind of a memory about this event. This was a very painful event. And the projection, representation of this event in various newspapers, commonsensically speaking, can be an interesting way to know how such events are being taken or projected in various news outlets. All right, as I said earlier, it picked two newspapers, one Pakistani, which is The Dawn, and the other New York Times, from American. And the basic aim was to analyze the construction, reproduction, and perpetuation of ideology through language. Whether there was some ideological framing working behind the projection of this news event in these two newspapers from various cultural contexts. One, broadly speaking, belongs to East, which is the Dawn Pakistani newspaper, and the other belongs to the West, which is, broadly speaking, an American newspaper, a very popular American newspaper. The objective was accomplished drawing on the use of lexical choices and syntactic structures employed in the editorials. And this study focused not on news events, rather on the editorials which were published in these newspapers on the day next to the event. It was also seen whether a particular text deals with the issues in an overt or implicit manner. Whether the issue is being tackled straightforwardly in a direct manner or an indirect manner. It may happen that some information may be dealt directly, and some information as a strategy by some newspapers may be dealt indirectly. So let's see what this analysis brings to us. The editorials selected for this analysis were published the next day after the Army public school attack. Why these newspapers were selected, authors also explained this in their article, and they were of the opinion that since these are the most popular newspapers in their English newspapers in their respective countries, and they usually represent the sentiment of the educated masses in their countries. So therefore, they picked these two newspapers and their editorials for the analysis. Qualitative research design was used for the analysis, and the basic questions which were there in front of researchers were how the editorials construct and portray the actors, various actors. For example, as I said, it was said allegedly that Talibans were involved. So how the Taliban versus those who were killed or injured in that event have been projected in the news reporting in these editorials. Then how the same issue has been taken up by two different papers in two different cultural settings. Does the cultural projection of these agents affect uh, and the editorial policy of these newspapers affect the overall representation of the same news event, which I'm sure was painful to the all people who would have heard about it. For a deeper analysis, the ideological square model of Vondeck was used, and then within this, the scheme of us versus them was used to see what has been projected as us and what has been projected as them. So, what kind of social distances were being created or negated. Then the study looked into some kind of lexical structures, syntactic structures, and lexical choices in order to build their analysis on. The results reveal, to cut it short, the results reveal that the representation of New York Times was more impartial than Dawn, as researchers believed that they clearly identified the attackers as Taliban, which was a very clear statement, and there was no doubt about it. They simply identified them as Taliban, and they identified them as them, something which is at distance from us, from the civilized world, as they believed it, and they considered all affectees as us, and they showed their sentiments towards them. In comparison, according to the authors of this article, researchers, the Dawn projection in its editorials of the same event was not that clear, because in as far as the projection of the attackers is concerned, they were named as militants or attackers, and they were not clearly named as Talibans in these editorials. However, the sentiment of us was very clear in Dawn also, because they also sympathized with those who were affected in that event. So sometimes, as I said earlier, there could be a slight projection change in the representation of various news events in the news projections or editorials of the newspapers, and that can be investigated from a critical discourse perspective. You, being future researchers, probably would look at these opportunities.